morning. Welcome to ThreatTraq Essentials. We're going to take a look at the basic cybersecurity lessons that we can learn from this week's ThreatTraq stories. I'm here with Stan Nurilov. How you doing, Stan?
Doing very well. How are you?
I see you have a quarantine beard.
Yes, I do.
That wasn't here last time. I've actually, I was getting a little scruffy, so I bought hair clippers and did my own hair over the weekend, but I have no idea what it looks like in the back.
I'm getting close to that myself.
I may have an unintended mullet, so who knows? Which, by the way, would be a great name for a band. So feel free to steal it out there.
Unintended mullet. Yeah, that's a good one.
Yes. Okay, so Stan, let's talk about the stories that we had this week. Tell me the story that you brought to us.
Reversing Labs actually did a very nice research piece about some malware that's being distributed in the developer libraries for Ruby. They're called gems. And so within those gems, somebody's figured out how to take legitimate libraries and package them together with some illegitimate content, ultimately to steal, potentially steal Bitcoins from unsuspecting developers.
So this is malware that has actually made its way into developers' libraries.
That's right. Yeah, it seems like the bad guys are taking legitimate libraries that exist out there, renaming them just slightly, like maybe a character, they might be replacing an underscore with a dash or something like that. But they add a little bit of extra, and this extra piece is really, a backdoor or Trojan that they're distributing with a legitimate library.
So for people who are using this service, how can they protect themselves?
I think it's very important always to consider where you're getting your software from. And I think the intended targets here are developers. Developers are usually, pressed for time. They're trying to make some feature work really quickly. There might be a deadline, and they reuse components. This is part of the natural way of developing software these days. We have to be really, really careful what kind of advice you take on the internet, where you download your libraries from, and make sure that you're downloading the library that you intend. A lot of times people are exchanging ideas on websites like Stack Exchange. A developer might post, "Hey, I have a problem. What do I do to resolve that problem, or how do I get around coding this?" And there's a lot of really good, helpful people offering insight, and sometimes they'll offer a library. Well, you have to be very careful they're using the correct libraries and downloading the correct ones, because if you make a typo, you mistype it, you might actually get something you weren't expecting. And it seems like in this case, somebody's thought that through, an adversary's thought that through, and they're putting these, copycat libraries out there, but with this hidden logic in it.
So let's talk about the story that Mike Klepper brought to us. That's about a vulnerability in Google Chrome, the browser. So that's really big because a lot of people use that, and for many of us, the browser is the primary way that we are interfacing with the internet, that and our email. But tell me about this vulnerability.
I think the web browsing vulnerabilities in general are very important and critical, and you must patch right away. And the reason, like you said, Don, we're all using the browser every day. It's our interface really into the world, especially now that we're kind of all working from home or using the internet a lot more. We're really, really relying on our web browsers to be secure. And this vulnerability is critical. It's so critical that they're not even publishing most of the details, probably until most people have patched. The probably the most important thing to know is definitely make sure that you've enabled automatic updates for Chrome for yourself, so that it can go ahead and download the updates and install them on your browser. Go ahead and maybe even restart your device to make sure that the updates took and the software is working appropriately.
So really, that's good advice for any browser that you're using, to set it on auto updates so that you get all the security updates automatically.
Yes, a lot of the time, the browser will just be downloading the updates behind the scenes. You'll be uninterrupted, and they'll even start installing it. And if a restart is required, a lot of times the browser will actually tell you, "Hey, it's time for the restart," so that your update can take place. So definitely make sure you review your settings. You have that enabled. It would probably be unwise in general to have that setting disabled nowadays, because that is how you interact with the internet, and you want to make sure that your browser is as secure as it can be.
Let's talk about the story that Karen Simon brought to us. That was about people's GitHub credentials getting stolen. Tell me first of all, what is GitHub and what is it that happened here?
GitHub is a really great website where people can exchange their code publicly or even privately. It's a code repository, and a lot of developers use it to distribute, research projects or even collaborate in different open source initiatives. Having your credentials stolen there has a couple of different impacts. For example, if you have private repositories, somebody might be able to access them that maybe you hadn't intended certain code to be public. So now people will be able to see that. But the second thing that's just as scary is they'll be able to upload things as you. So if you're a trusted developer and you have a community of followers who rely on your code or on your project or on your open source contributions, and your account gets compromised, then all the people who trust you, they will automatically trust your code. But if an adversary uploads something there, could really have a significant impact to all of the users who rely on you. So I think it's important for developers to consider, their overall security hygiene to make sure that, not only are they not putting their own data at risk, but the users who trust them, they're not putting them at risk either.
So what advice do we want to give them?
I think one of the best things you could do these days is try not to rely on passwords as the only way to authenticate into a website. A lot of services, including GitHub, now offer a way to enable two-factor authentication. And a lot of them actually have like authenticator apps you can download. And so anytime depending on how the scheme is set up, anytime you try to authenticate, it'll actually ask you, do you approve this authentication? And it'll be like on your mobile device or on some other device that you have that's not your computer, and it allows you to basically have two factors instead of just a password. Makes it a little bit difficult for people to just guess their way in or even to trick you, because it's a lot harder to trick you to approve a request that you obviously didn't make.
Well, thank you, Stan, and thanks all of you for watching. As always, please like and subscribe below so you don't miss any of these episodes or any of this expert advice. And if you want to go deeper into these stories, click on the playlist below. We'll see you next time.